Are Khalifa Haftar's days numbered? The Libyan warlord loses his last stronghold in the west. And did Turkey's military intervention turn the tide? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Bernard Smith. Khalifa Haftar's ambitions in Libya are unravelling quickly. The warlord launched an offensive 14 months ago to capture the capital Tripoli from the UN-recognised Government of National Accord, or GNA. Its forces say they've regained full control of Tripoli. And they've pushed Haftar's fighters from the town of Tarhouna, their last stronghold in western Libya. That follows weeks of similar defeats and losses of territory along the coast. But Haftar remains in control of large parts of eastern and southern Libya, where the oil fields are. Our correspondent Mahmoud Abdul Wahid has more from Tarhouna.
Behind me, the government forces, who are now in full control of the city of Tarhouna, are celebrating the victory, the defeat of Haftar's forces in the city of Tarhouna. Now, by losing the city of Tarhouna, Haftar's forces have lost their major and last stronghold in western Libya. As you know, that the swift takeover of the city of Tarhouna, the swift seizure of the city of Tarhouna is mainly attributed to the Turkish military support for the government forces, and also the withdrawal of the Russian mercenaries from the Wagner group, who have been fighting alongside Haftar's forces. Now, this city, the city of Tarhouna, about 75 kilometers south of the capital, Tripoli, is very strategic, very significant. From here, Haftar's forces had a central command over the past year. And from here, Russian military experts, along with Emirati and Egyptian military experts who have been supporting Haftar, they ran the battles in southern Tripoli from the central command in the city of Tarhouna. From Tarhouna, Haftar's forces received military reinforcement and also military supplies over the past year.
Momentum began to shift in January when Turkey started sending troops and drones to support the internationally recognised government. And Turkey's president has promised more cooperation with Libya's prime minister. The United Nations says talks on a ceasefire have resumed for the first time in 3 months. Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Fayez al-Sarraj urged nations such as Russia, Egypt and the UAE to stop supporting Khalifa Haftar.
Hiçbir zaman Libya halkının
A person who is never concerned about the Libyan people's problems and who has been putting Libya's future in constant danger can never have the capability to sit at the negotiation table. This person and those who provide political, military and financial support to him are the biggest obstacle to peace.
I would like to address the countries that have supported this aggression and that contributed to the killing of Libyans and the destruction of the country. You lost your bet. We will take you to court. And here, you have just tasted defeat at the gates of Tripoli, despite how you have supported the war criminal with money and weapons. Keep your hands off us. Let Libyans live in peace. History is unforgiving.
Let's introduce our panel. In Turkey's capital, Ankara, Bilgehan Ozturk, a researcher in the SETA Foundation, a think tank. In San Antonio, Texas, Mansour Kikhia, professor of politics at the University of Texas in San Antonio. And in Washington, D.C., William Lawrence, senior adjunct professorial lecturer at the American University School of International Service. Welcome to you all. William, first of all, to you. Is what we've seen in Libya in the last 24 hours a de-escalation or just a turning point?
It's definitely a turning point. If you look at those color maps of Libya and who controls what, we've had a major set of changes just in the last 24 hours that pushed the front lines for the Western government from 20 kilometers outside of Tripoli to 140 kilometers outside of Tripoli. And the Russian mercenaries, who are perhaps the most important troops fighting for the east, are now back 600 kilometers as part of a Turkey-Russian deal. So this is a major turning point, and it's part of an escalation as the West is calculating how far it can go. And certainly the Western government would like to take over the rest of Libya now that they've had a string of successes over the last 6 weeks. But wiser minds all around the world and many others are trying to caution the West not to overplay its hand and to get back to the negotiation table.
Bilgehan, will Turkey's intervention encourage a de-escalation, or is this a turning point? What will Turkey want to happen?
Well, what Turkey wants is very, very clear and consistent over the years, I believe, because we saw Turkey standing with the legitimate government in the recent years. But even before that, Turkey was always aiming for a negotiated political solution before the Haftars takeover of Eastern Libyan administration and his claim to the rule of the whole country. Turkey was trying to engage both Western Libyan actors and also Eastern Libyan actors. What Turkey, for the time being, wants is the rolling back of Haftar's aggressiveness, which is boosted by a number of regional and global actors, and stalling and backfiring this aggressive attempt to take over Tripoli and take down the GNA, which is now seem to be achieved already. Now, militarily speaking, the GNA side and by definition Turkey would like to march even further east in order to take back the towns such as Sirt and also the small towns such as Weshka east of Misrata. At the end of this process, the military aspect of this, again, what Turkey wants to see, the elimination of Haftar as an purportedly legal actor from the Libyan scene, because Turkey views him as a legitimate coup plotter at putschist, which was again voiced by yesterday's meeting by President Erdogan himself once more. So the elimination of Haftar as a putschist, and if possible, the rise of alternative actors in eastern Libya who have been under the pressure of Haftar himself, as we saw in two attempts of Haftar militarily taking over the rule of the country.
All right. Okay. Well, Mansour, there you are. It sounds like the game's up for Haftar. Turkey's not going to stop until he's gone, is it?
No, I don't think so. And first of all, I mean, the Americans say, okay, the fat lady hasn't sung yet. It's still going on. This is one. And I think it's a mistake to try to just negate Haftar. He still has soldiers. He still has arms. And Turkish aggression is documented. Why is Turkey doing all this? Why, as though Mr. Sarraj is a legitimate government? Is not. And Turkey paying for all these mercenaries and why? Because it loves Libyans? Come on, stop that. Okay, it's interest. I mean, de Gaulle was quite right. There are no there are no friends in international politics. They're only interests. And Turkish Sarraj's agreement reminds me again of, I was reading about de Gaulle yesterday, and to paraphrase what he said, which is really wonderful. He says, agreements between the weak and the strong, okay, are like roses and young girls. You start giving up your hat, then you give your coat, then you give your shirt, then you give your skin, and then you give your soul. Okay, what is Turkey doing in Libya? I was hoping a quick end to both sides. I was hoping to an end to conflict in Libya. Yesterday in Benghazi, there was a wake. 31 people were buried yesterday, and the country and the city is seething. Okay, and to empower the radical Islamists in the West. Oh, we won't stop until we get the oil fields. Ultimately, this is what it's all about.
Okay.
It's the oil fields in Cyrenaica. Well, the oil fields are the center of Libya. No, they're not. They are in Cyrenaica. 70% of Libya's oil is in Cyrenaica.
Okay.
And the Misratans and the West want that oil, and they will go to any length to do it.
All right.
Well, Haftar made big mistakes. He depended on the Russians. He depended on, now he has learned the hard way that there are no friends in international politics, only interests.
William, Haftar's days are numbered, aren't they? We're hearing reports he might even be in Cairo at the moment, meeting with Sisi along with the leader of the Libyan House of Representatives. They're gonna try and move him on, aren't they?
Well, Haftar doesn't just have 9 lives. I'd say he has 18 lives if you look at his career. So counting Haftar out is not a good bet in Libya. But there's no question that the Russians are frustrated with Haftar. The Emiratis have been frustrated with Haftar for some years now. The Egyptians are frustrated with him. And when he declared last month that he wanted to take over the Eastern Parliament and the Eastern government against the very legitimacy that gives him the position he's in, he was rebuffed by the head of the parliament to some degree, who started a separate peace plan, which is backed by the Russians and others. And so while there are several vectors of pressure, both from inside and outside Libya, to force Haftar out, I think he will try to hang on for as long as possible, because for Haftar, it's all about gaining power in order to reach his ideological and other objectives. It's not about just the cause of the East or the cause, some defense of the East. It's about his own objectives. And if I could just disagree a little bit with my respected colleague in Texas, any of the motivations that he's telling about in terms of the Turks in the West can be even more applied to the Haftar in the East. Certainly, there are twice as many mercenaries fighting for the East. Their fighting, for control of oil is just as bad as any fighting for control from the West. And Haftar has even more Islamists fighting for him as the supposed Islamist scourge he's trying to rid from the West. So most of these accusations are projections from the East to the West about what the East is doing, even worse than the West in most cases. Now, the solution here obviously will be a negotiated one. When the Libyan actors wise up to that point is unclear at this point, but I would not count Haftar out yet.
Bilgehan, what will the Turkish president be telling the Tripoli-based Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj to do now? Will he be telling him to fight on, to push further east, or will he be telling him to take part in a ceasefire and talk?
Well, if we look at the statement by the Fayez al-Sarraj yesterday, he said he doesn't want to sit down with Haftar at the moment because for the past 1 year, more than 1 year, we saw repeated aggression by Haftar camp on the Tripoli. But when the military balance changed in the Tripolitania, we saw Eastern actors, the spokesman of Haftar, Ahmed al-Mismari, and also Haftar himself, talking about ceasefire, cessation of hostilities, and for the sake of Ramadan and also Eid al-Fitr for religious and humanitarian purposes. But this does not seem to be quite convincing because these conditions have been around for a very long time, but we have not seen these actors calling for negotiation, and they have been strongly defiant in the face of any suggestions for peace and negotiations. Please remember, Khalifa Haftar scrapped and rejected all international, attempts to reach a ceasefire. And you remember the Moscow meetings. He did not even sign the a ceasefire agreement, and even Berlin, he did not accept the ceasefire solution. So it is not realistic to expect the Eastern actors, chiefly Khalifa Haftar, to expect to accept and honor a ceasefire and negotiated solution. The only thing that would convince him and the other affiliates of him is a military defeat. What made them calling for ceasefire is the fact that they were defeated militarily in Tripolitania, and that was thanks to Turkey's support to government of national accord, because DNA has been quite weak because no one was supporting them apart from Turkey after the memorandum of understanding. But on the other hand, we had Khalifa Haftar, supported by many regional and global actors. So what President Erdogan would tell Fayez Sarraj is he would advise him to come to negotiation table, but I think after some military targets are being achieved, not now.
All right. Well, we'll take a perfect time to take a short pause there as my colleague Alex Gotopoulos takes a closer look at how foreign military intervention has changed the course of the war.
Air power has been decisive in changing the fortunes of each side in turn, in particular with the use of armed drones. The warlord Khalifa Haftar's forces first used Chinese-made Winglong 2 armed drones 4 years ago. With a range of 1,500 kilometers, these have been able to operate out of bases in the east, striking government targets in the west. The Winglongs helped forces loyal to Khalifa Haftar advance and besiege the beleaguered GNA in Tripoli, often inflicting indiscriminate damage. But Turkey's extensive military aid to the UN-backed government earlier this year changed all that. As the GNA started to receive Turkish armed drones, namely the Bayraktar TB2, these drones, with their limited range, while not as capable as the Winglongs, still gave the GNA the ability to strike Haftar's forces, interrupt his supply lines and protect its own units as they advanced, catching their enemies by surprise as Tripoli's troops counterattacked.
Mansour, Haftar doesn't have that many friends in the East, unified support. Will there be now cracks more obvious in showing over there? Will there be time? Who else could take over from him, do you think?
Well, this is difficult. You know, Haftar doesn't listen. I personally said that to him. I said to him, you know, your lines of supply make no sense. Attacking the West in such a way makes no sense. But his problem is that he doesn't listen. Believe it or not, I mean, I'm becoming more and more convinced that politicians can't rule in Libya, at least right now. They can't govern. They can't govern because the job is too difficult for them, and because they're overwhelmed with this narcissism. He doesn't listen. And first of all, even in the East, Haftar is there by force. He has the guns. He has the guns. Yesterday, I had a number of calls. I was spent the whole day talking on the phone. The East is seething with anger at Haftar on one point, on one side, and seething with anger at the West, because all those individuals or cities that befriended him now turned against him. Particularly the city of Bin Walid, which was supporting him just a week ago. They attacked the Eastern soldiers, and they took their arms. And Easterners are very, very angry because there's peace? No. But right now, what we're talking right now, is there a third way? There should be, but there isn't right now. As I said, the only force that can perhaps ameliorate this is the Libyan parliament. And the Libyan parliament, Haftar has been fighting with Haftar. This is why there's a meeting in Cairo, you know. But don't back Haftar out. Don't negate Haftar. Haftar is still a force in the East, and he's going to be a force in Libya. And Sarraj will have to deal with him one way or another. Perhaps not by himself, but he has to deal with him. Let me just tell you one thing which I spoke to Haftar with on his meeting in Berlin, about Berlin. I said to him, Mr. Haftar, your trip to Berlin shows a little bit of ignorance about what you should do. You went to Berlin, you took your grandson, and you took your son-in-law. What you should have done going to Berlin to talk over there, at least, you should have at least a delegation made up of individuals who talk about the East as a partner, not you by yourself. You know, he just laughed it off. You know, and this is the problem is that when you're talking to Haftar, he has ingrained in his mind is that I am the leader. I'm the one who decides what happens. Okay. And he's not.
All right. William, Mansour hinting there at increased instability now in the East. I know you tell us people should not write off Khalifa Haftar, but is there someone else there that the UAE and Egypt would want now to take over from him? They've had enough of him, haven't they?
Very much so, although, again, I agree with Mr. Kikhia that we should not count him out, and he does have a power base, not unlike Gaddafi's. Gaddafi's had sort of two tribes with him, and then the rest of it was deals. And I would say Haftar is quite similar in that respect. Certainly the Russians have tried several times to send agents to contact Gaddafi's son, Saif al-Islam Gaddafi, and that has not worked in terms of replacing Haftar, but continues to be one of the possible strategies. There are commanders in the east, names that have been floated of people that could replace Haftar, but they're no more respected than Haftar is. There are tribal leaders in the east. There are Salafist leaders who are even stronger in terms of his military forces. But there's no obvious candidate. And I agree strongly that we have the Haftar that we have, not the Haftar that we want. And he has anti-democratic tendencies and the tendency to want to put his own family members in key positions of power. And so that's going to continue to work against him. But that's true of a lot of leaders in Libya, particularly those of the east, which is built on this sort of, in many respects, this tribal structure. The only solution is a civil democratic one, and the only powers that are proposing that are the Western leaders, the very Western leaders that the East is so angry at, along with their own leadership. So the only solution, as everyone's been saying, is going to be a UN-led process in which everyone has a seat at the table. I was involved in the preparations for the Palermo conference in Tunis and met with many Libyan leaders that came to meet with us there, and I was surprised how many Libyan leaders just want the microphone and to grieve at these conferences rather than make space for other interests and other politicians. Libyans often say that, you know, every Libyan is a little Gaddafi. And so a lot of this is just the learning curve to getting to democratic outcomes. And it's a long, slow slog. Some Libyans are ahead of others in that process, but certainly Haftar is not one of those leaders ready to make those types of concessions.
Bilgehan, no doubt that Khalifa Haftar is at least on the back foot, but Tripoli is no more stable than other parts of Libya, is it? There's a host of militias in there that Sarraj has to keep happy. How can Turkey help maintain the stability in Tripoli when there are so many different militias involved in the city there?
There are, a lot of different groups, different militias, and it is itself a challenge of governing the capital in any given area. But what we experienced after Turkey intervened militarily, we saw a command, a single strategy coming out of a single chain of command. So Turkish military's role in Tripoli has been through military advisors, the staff officers of Turkish armed forces, and they proved to be quite competent of, let's say, commanding various very different militias in the same direction, throughout operations, taking over Watiya Air Base, taking over the southern suburbs. So I think Turkish military's presence there proved to be efficient in terms of merging all those differences for the same aim of getting rid of Haftar's aggression. And I think this experience should be or could be replicated in civilian and administrative areas as well. Turkey might offer its advisory role in terms of public administration, even state building. So Turkey has some capacity, in terms of providing the GNA those capacities.
Mansour, when we last spoke about this a few weeks ago, I see you shaking your head there. You said then Libyans are tired and Haftar is the only alternative to secure peace. They can't rely on the militias. But we're stuck with the militias, it seems.
Yes, I agree. Unfortunately, this is where Libya is. We can't rely on the militias, and I'm sorry. I really am sorry that this image of this magnanimous Turkey helping the Libyans. What is Turkey doing in Libya, and how long does it plan to stay in Libya? Okay, and we're talking about Haftar. You're talking about Haftar. I'm not supporting Haftar. He's a bad man. He's a dictator, and I'd like to see the end of him as well too. But I certainly don't want to see the militias in Tripoli either. I personally, my personal feeling in this, I would never, ever accept a theocracy. I would never accept it. Whether it's from Erdogan or from the militia that he supports in the West.
OK. Unfortunately, gentlemen, we are out of time. But thank you to Bilgehan Ozturk, to Mansour al-Kikhia and Dr. William Lawrence. And thank you, too, for watching. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. We are at AJ Inside Story, and I am at Jazeera Bernard. From me, Bernard Smith, and the whole team here in Doha, bye for now.